Ever get that, like, eerie feeling, like the universe is trying to tell you something?
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, like when you bump into someone and you were just thinking about them?
Totally.
Or you keep seeing the same number over and over again?
Yeah.
Well, today we are diving deep into all of that. It's a world of synchronicities.
Mm,
We're going to be exploring whether these are just random coincidences
right.
or if they mean something more.
Yeah. It really makes you wonder, right? Like, what if there's more to reality than we realize?
I know,
It's like
right?
we just see the tip of the iceberg.
And you sent over some really cool writings about what Carl Jung had to say about synchronicities.
Yeah, I did. I thought it would be a good jumping off point to kind of unpack some of this
So
stuff.
let's unpack it. Let's dive in.
Okay, so Jung believed that synchronicities, they weren't just any type of coincidences.
Uh,
They were these really meaningful coincidences that had this like personal resonance. It's
oh.
almost as if like the universe is sending you a little message.
Okay, so what would be like an example of that?
So let's say, for example, you're struggling with a really big decision, and then suddenly you stumble across a quote.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's in a book you're reading. Maybe it's something someone says to you, or even like a conversation you overhear.
Right.
That seems to be like the perfect message for you in that moment. That could be a synchronicity.
So it's not just like, oh, I ran into my old college roommate at the grocery store.
It could be, though. I mean,
Yeah.
it depends.
Okay.
What if you hadn't seen that person in like 10 years and you're just thinking about them?
Right. And it's like, what does that mean?
Exactly. So it's all about whether or not it has some kind of personal significance for you.
So is it more about the way that we are interpreting it? Are we just like wanting to see these signs? Or is there really something there?
I think that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Jung believed that we are kind of predisposed to see these connections
Okay.
and that they were the universe's way of trying to guide us towards our true path.
Okay. So the universe is trying to tell us something, but it might not be super obvious.
Right. Sometimes it's veiled in symbolism.
Okay. Symbolism.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that because now it's getting really interesting.
This is where it gets really juicy, right? So he also believed in these things called archetypes. They're basically these primal, universal patterns and images that exist in our collective unconscious. It's like we have this deep well of shared imagery that we all tap into. And when these archetypes show up in our synchronicities, it can point to these like deeper psychological or spiritual themes.
So for example.
So let's say you keep seeing bridges everywhere.
Okay.
That could be a sign that you need to be more adaptable. You need to bridge a gap in your own life.
That makes sense. So I need to pay more attention to recurring themes and then try and decipher what they mean to me personally.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. But is there any chance that we're just, kind of making these connections up? Like, is this just confirmation bias?
Absolutely. It's totally possible. Like I used to think seeing green cars meant I was going to have a lucky day.
Okay.
Guess what? I started seeing them everywhere. But I do think even if it's confirmation bias, if it helps you feel more connected to something larger than yourself, maybe it's not such a bad thing, right?
That's a good point. If it makes me feel good, then who really cares, right?
Right. And that's why a lot of people find it helpful to keep a synchronicity journal.
Okay, a synchronicity journal. What is that?
Basically just like a journal where you keep track of all of these meaningful coincidences or synchronicities that are happening.
So I'm writing down the repeating numbers, the weird encounters. Anytime I'm like, did that just really happen?
Yes. And by paying attention to them, you might be more aware of the patterns and what they mean.
Okay. So we've talked about Carl Jung. We've talked about what synchronicities are, how they could be messages from the universe.
Maybe?
Or maybe just our brains connecting dots that aren't really there.
Right.
So what's the final verdict? What does it all mean?
That's the thing about synchronicities. I don't know if we'll ever really know the answer.
Yeah.
But I think the real magic happens when we stay open to those possibilities,
Yeah.
when we allow ourselves to be surprised by life.
I love that. Stay open to the possibilities. Keep those synchronicity journals handy. Who knows what you might find? Thanks for listening, everybody.